We've got some serious weather here. So if I disappear, the super team is here, the A team is here, they'll take over and we'll still keep rocking. Okay. Thanks, guys. All right. Welcome, everybody. Nadia, recovered alcoholic. We are on chapter 2. There is a solution. Amen. Yeah. And we read the first paragraph last week, so I think we'll just start again. We'll just read it again and we'll just kick it off. There is a solution. And you know what I make the newcomer that I'm working with, I make them write next to it, for me. There is a solution for me. Yes. Right. This is not an I program. This is a we program of Alcoholics Anonymous. No, thousands. You can line that out and write millions of men and women who were just as once as hopeless as Bill. Nearly all have recovered. And just a little side note, that word is repeated in the 164 pages 41 times in this book. And what is recovered? That means that we are returned to our original state. We're returned to our original state. And we find out a little later that we are, what is our original state? Children of God, agents of God, spearheads. We are returned to our original state. They have solved the drink problem. Now stop there and ask your sponsee, how do you feel about this? How do you feel about these statements? How do you feel about that sentence? They have solved the drink problem. Told you we're going to get truckloads of hope tonight. We are average Americans. Yes, they are speaking about the original ones that set this train in motion and gave the context to this, but let's make it work for us. Let's line that out. Citizens of the world, all sections of this country, world, and many of its occupations are represented. You know what is really important about that little line there? Many of its occupations are represented. That tells me that alcohol does not discriminate. Come from a rich background, a poor background. You were adopted, you weren't adopted. You were adored when you were a child, you were rejected when you were a child. This disease does not have a formula who it chooses. As well as many political, economic, social, and religious backgrounds. We're all welcome here. The broad highway is roomy, all-inclusive. We are people who normally would not mix. Let's just for a second, let's just stop. And if you can see all your squares, have a squiz, just have a look at all these faces. In our drinking days, we probably wouldn't have drank together because there's not enough room there's not enough space in the room for more than just me. I would have made sure I would have butted you right out of there. So no, we normally wouldn't have mixed. But here we are. And you know, even just go to your home group and have a look around. And the thing is, I will judge you if you are different. If I spot the tiniest difference in you, I'm going to judge you. And then I'm going to separate myself from you. And then I don't have this problem and I don't need this solution. But there exists among us a fellowship, a friendliness, and an understanding which is indescribably wonderful. You know? Sorry, I'm getting very emotional. Last night we did a history of AA, and I was just sharing with Rob before the meeting. I'm just realizing how we're heading up to Founders Day rally, how incredibly lucky we are. My entire memory of being on planet Earth, I never felt fellowship. I never felt friendliness. I'm not friendly. I can't be friendly by my own accord, but we're going to get into that a little later. I craved friendliness. I craved fellowship. I craved to feel like I belonged somewhere. And you know, on a Monday night, I know that I look forward to this the whole day. the whole day. My engines are gearing to get you and be with you guys. Because that's what I found in these rooms. Although in the beginning I was like, these guys are crazy. These guys are crazy. What do they want from me? Why are they like, why? You're so nice to me. Everyone couldn't wait to see the back end of me. Bill Gates.
Thank you, Nadia. I'm an alcoholic named Bill. And for those of you who have not been here before, Nadia is very matter of fact. You can rely on absolutely anything she says, just like the doctor's opinion says. Me, on the other hand, it may need more further authentication. But it's interesting that you stopped and said we could have scratched that out and wrote millions. And I think the reason that it's limited to thousands, even in the fourth edition, is because not all alcoholics coming into AA today are just as hopeless as Bill. They talk about it in the 12 and 12. Now, in We Agnostics, it says most of us have to be pretty badly mangled. When they were writing that, there was no AA on the horizon. There was no Zoom. There were no cell phones. AA wasn't in the phone book because AA wasn't invented yet. It hadn't manifested. What happened is you had a couple drunks and these people were hopeless. Nadia was talking about the history of AA. We spent, I don't know when we started this meeting, sometime in 2015 before the pandemic, and we just now finished up with Bill's story. And when you look at all the things he tried to do to solve his problem, a brother-in-law that kept taking him to the hospital, shock treatment, belladonna, swearing on the Bible, everything he tried. And then he got to the point where he cursed himself for being a coward because he couldn't take his own life. This was a guy who was hopeless. He knew he was hopeless. He desperately wanted an answer, and there was none on the horizon. And now Alcoholics Anonymous is a household name. And then the 12 and 12 say, guess what? We raised the bottom. Well, you might raise the bottom, but what you do is you minimize my opportunity to have the same experience that Bill Wilson had. Because when you're hanging on by a thread off of a mountain, how they say it, there's a lion getting ready to bite you, and there's a strawberry, reach out and get the strawberry. When you know hopelessness, when he talked about looking into the abyss, the eyes of hell, and the abyss yawned, waiting to swallow him up. And he cried out, if there be a God, let him show himself. Boy, if I could duplicate that level of desperation, you wouldn't have to compel me to take these steps or answer the phone or go to meetings or read the big book or help other people. I would do it instinctively. But what happens now is we come in, and here I think is a problem that the fellowship can create within the fellowship. Is that some of us have them stories like Rob and Ollie. Those are some low bottom drunks right there. And I want to have the same recognition and audience that they do. So I start making up stories, pretending like I'm sicker than I really am, which may be sicker than I really know. But here's how you can tell why this could be a problem. Because everything in this book lines up and could substantiate what we're talking about. It says most of us have been unwilling to admit we're real alcoholics. When they come in the door and represent that they got here 10 years too late, my experience is they don't stick around because inside their mind, they're telling themselves they got here 10 years too early if they even will ever belong here. So that may be why, Nadia, that this had to be hopeless, desperate cases that at all costs they were seeking a solution for a dilemma that they knew they had. Anyhow, you can't document that, but I like it.
I like it too. And that is why I spend as much time as I can in those first 4 chapters, because I got to know that you need this solution. Because there's a lot of stuff we got to do. This is a program of action. This is a program of action, day in, day out, no day off. But I'm not going to get on my Navy SEAL platform, not yet. We'll get there. But I echo you, Bill. Thank you. Right. So I just want a little bit of history. He's going to refer now to a shipwreck. And remember, this is written 1930s. 1912, the Titanic sank. So he's going to make reference to that experience now. We are like the passengers of a great liner the moment after rescue from shipwreck, when camaraderie, Joyousness and democracy pervade the vessel from steerage to captain's table. So you got your big fancy ocean liner. Steerage are where the poorer blue collar folk would be, and captain's table is where your rich, more affluent guests would be on the boat. The two would never mix. In fact, they wouldn't even see each other board the boat, if that's the right word. Board the boat? I don't know if that's even a word. No, okay, bear with me. You can't hold me to anything I say, actually, Bill, unless it's in
It
the
was
book.
almost like that romantic depiction of the Titanic. Jack was down in the steerage, and that girl from the royalty was up on top having dinner at the captain's table. They wouldn't normally
Thank
mix.
you. But they did. When that thing came a crashing, they mixed. However, our joy from disaster, our joy in escape from disaster does not subside as we go in our individual ways. So what would happen with the sinking of the Titanic? Once a year, they would all get together and they would celebrate their survival, the fact that they'd been rescued. But they only saw each other once a year, celebrated in joy, and I'm sure that that dissipated over time. The thing is with us, we come together once a week. We come together, we start following each other at meetings. That feeling of joy and camaraderie does not disappear. We don't just come back once a year to each other. Well, the hopeless variety definitely don't. The feeling of having shared in a common peril is one element in the powerful cement which binds us. One element is the meetings. And the reason I'm making a point of this is I came into these rooms 2014, and maybe someone was saying to me, get the book and get into it. Maybe I wasn't listening. I don't know. I can't remember. I do know that something I heard every single meeting I went to was just come back. Just keep coming to meetings. Don't drink, come to meetings. Don't drink, come to meetings. That's what I heard. And Bill is telling us here, he's saying this is one element in the cement that binds us. But that in itself would never have held us together as we are now joined. Why? Because we are beyond human aid. We're beyond human aid. And if you're going to the meeting because you feel bad and you need a meeting, you're forgetting. We are the three pertinent ideas. No human power could have relieved us of our alcoholism. Right, so there's four facts. There's four facts in this chapter, and the first one is called the tremendous fact. The tremendous fact for every one of us is that we have discovered a common solution. We have a way out on which we can absolutely agree and upon which we can join in brotherly and harmonious action. We need each other. We need each other. This is a we program. That's not big book, but it definitely comes from here. That's just a little slogan that I've heard, and we put it together. This is I just also want to point out a little promise here. One of the sneaky promises, page F, my darling sister, she always talks about sneaky promises. This one element in the powerful cement which binds us, that's a promise. We are binded to each other. There's a bond in here that is just, it's supernatural, right? This is the great news. This is the great news. This book carries to those who suffer from alcoholism. That is the purpose of this book, this great news. There's a solution. And that is all our unity statement. We have a way out in which we can join in brotherly and harmonious action. If you're a three-legger, you know unity is one side of that pyramid that we just cannot do without. We cannot do without.
So why is this celebration? We've just been rescued from shipwreck. We were in the World Trade Center when it was burning up and we got rescued. Why is that not enough to keep us together as survivors of that catastrophe? because it's a memory. It becomes what Bill Wilson referred to as time out of mind. Pain and suffering that I can't bring into my memory with sufficient force of the last debacle was likened to a woman giving childbirth. I can't imagine how pleasant that is. But if they could stay in the emotional investment, they remember it was painful, but that's all, it's a memory. They can't bring into their mind with sufficient force what happens when you try and pass a bowling ball through, through a tiny thing. It's got it. And then the joy of birth makes the pain go away. So what happens is the reason we're not once joined is that's not enough to keep us together, is because we don't have the ability to realize how devastating it was until we go back to the ship and rescue more people, or to other ships. We've got to go back, number one, as a reminder, and number two, because something's happened. Because I promise you, I'm going to hug. It doesn't matter if I'm a harlot or the president of a country. If we get free, the elation of being delivered from something that was going to take our life would make us jump for joy. There would be, ego would be out of it. The emotion, the exhilaration, the excitement of being saved would compel me. It wouldn't matter. I wouldn't say to you, what race are you or what class or caste are you in? We would be so overwhelmed with emotion. The gratitude would compel us. But then we go our own separate ways. You guys go back to Wall Street. I go back to the penitentiary, wherever it is that I hang out and you hang out. But what that's saying, and here's what sometimes takes place in our fellowship. All I have to talk about when I get sober is, guess what? It's going down on the Titanic. But that is not substantial enough to keep me here. I lose an emotional attachment to the pain and the suffering and the consequences of a week or a month ago. So we have to do something other than sit around this platform and talk about how bad our lives got from drinking. I remember there was a group of us from a meeting in St. Pete that took a panel into the local detox. And the first three people that talked, they really nailed the first step. And finally, a guy in detox, which I guess had more sense than they did that day, he looked at them and said, "We know that. That's why we're here. Do you have something more than a shipwreck story for me?" And that's what happens, is what we do is we carry the message. And she's talking about the facts. The fact is our creator's entered into our heart and lives in a way which is indeed miraculous. We've discovered a common solution on which we can absolutely agree. We have a way out, because your experience will probably have shown you by the time the ship sank that you've been jumping from sinking ship to sinking ship, and now you're under the water and the life preserver's there. I'll do anything to have that gift, because I don't want to go back to the drink. And every other time that I've made that declaration that don't want to go back to the drink, I've inevitably gone back to the drink. I have no defense. Lack of power is my dilemma. There's got to be a more than a celebration because I was rescued one more time, because I've been rescued a lot of times. That never kept me rescued. Just let me build up strength for the next battle.
So let's go see what Bill's talking about. Let's go see what he was referencing in the book, because this is it. This is what we do. We do line outs, and because this just makes it just, this book is how many inches is this? What is this? This is like 12 centimeters. I don't know what that is in inches. My American brothers and sisters, you guys speak in a different language. But how deep do you want to go? Let's go. Look, let's go to page 24, second paragraph. This is what Bill was talking about. We will forget because we've been bouncing from sinking ship to sinking ship. We are unable at certain times to bring into our consciousness with sufficient force the memory of the suffering and humiliation of even a week or a month or a year ago. We are without defense against that first drink. And there's somewhere else that Bill W. himself also talks about this. He says on page 8, are you with me? Page 8 is the third paragraph, second sentence. Fear sobered me up for a bit. Fear can work, but it dissipates, and we forget because we have the obsessive alcoholic mind. And if we don't have a spiritual solution between us and that first drink, it's game over. But we're not talking about game over tonight. Tonight we're talking about buckets of hope. That's why I'm on this big buzz.
Is the rescue from the shipwreck that's ready to sink is not the problem. We were drowning, and if rescuing us from drowning was the solution, that would be sufficient. But here's what we discover about alcoholism. We want to go back and get on the boat. There's something wrong with our thinking. And Rob put up the first sentence in what Nadia talked about on page 24. It says, for reasons yet obscure. That means hidden. It hasn't been revealed. We don't know why. The alcoholic at certain times cannot bring in to his consciousness with sufficient force the memory and suffering of humiliation of a week or a month ago. We are without defense. And then it talks about the sentence that Nadia so graciously read there, which says, guess what, guys? We're in trouble. We're in more trouble than we know. CPR doesn't save us. Mouth-to-mouth resuscitation may get us breathing, but it will not sustain us. We've got to go much further.
The grace of God will also just lift eventually, and then we're not safe and protected no more when we're out there on our own devices. Page 18. An illness of this sort, stop. I did not know that this was an illness for 7 years in these rooms. And if I heard something so beautiful last night. Oh, I have to share this with you. So if I don't know that this is a disease, and like Bill said, I want to go back to that sinking ship. I will want to go back to that sinking ship because it's going to be different next time. If I don't know what this disease is and what the disease of alcoholism encompasses, I'm going to drink. But now the thing is, I'm also not going to want this solution. If I'm not sick, I don't want your medicine. I don't want service, talking to newcomers, reading out of a boring old book that looks like it should be in a secondhand bookstore. No, thank you. But if I know that I have the disease of alcoholism, I'll read the secondhand bookstore. This beautiful book, I will do what it takes. But I want to share something with you that I heard last night. When Bill W. went to go see Dr. Bob had been swimming around the Oxford group. And here's another cool little fact. The Oxford group was dubbed by the South African press. It was actually, that name was given to them by the South African press. You can check that, Bill. It's a fact. I checked it. It's awesome. So Dr. Bob was with them, and he wasn't getting sober. The thing is, he had the solution, but he didn't know what the disease was. Bill had disease. He knew what the disease was, and he got together with Dr. Bob, who had this. I mean, it's amazing, right? So, yeah, an illness of this sort, if I don't know that I have a disease, I don't want your simple spiritual toolkit. And we have come to.
Anyone ever have the same concept in their head? In other words, the guilt, shame, and remorse of what I was doing. It seemed not punitive enough to tell me I was ill. You understand, it was easier for me to think I was bad, because how could I do these things? Don't excuse it by some illness, please. I know that you're trying to give me feather dust and all that nonsense. I'm just a rotten person. The reason that they could call it an illness and then classify it as a disease is because alcoholism is chronic, progressive, fatal, and very predictable. If you remember in the 50s or whatever it was, Dr. Jelinek came out with a chart, and he described the increased tolerance with the alcoholic, our insatiable appetite. We could handle what it needed to try and satisfy that And at the end of the cycle, after it goes through this curve of moral decline, all of a sudden our tolerance from alcohol, we go crazy with one or two drinks when we used to be able to drink gallons. So it's predictable like any other illness or disease. The problem is I can't separate myself from the illness because I think ultimately then I have to realize that I have no choice. That's a scary thought when something's calling the shots in my life. I know they're calling the shots, and I have to give up my right to think that I have the ability to do anything to stop it. That's a powerlessness that I might not be ready to look at. Hence, a lot more DUIs, jails, institutions. So I finally say, holy moly, I'm sick. Well, we tried to tell you that 30 years ago. You just weren't paying attention. It wasn't so much that I wasn't paying attention. There was something inside of me that was compelling me to always set in motion this cycle that ultimately put me in a position I didn't want to be in. And I'll say one more thing and then I'll be quiet for a minute. Alcoholics aren't the only people who will not treat their illnesses. There are people that are diagnosed diabetic, which means they have diabetes, and they won't take insulin, go to the doctor, and they'll eat as much ice cream and sugar as they're chopping off digits and then limbs, and ultimately they die. We're not the only crazy people in the world. Our problem is when we set the cycle in motion, all bets are off. Not only are we self-destructive, but we're dangerous. Dangerous is going to talk about the annihilation with everything worthwhile in life. If I'm quiet and let Nadia read on. So it's a disease like no other, because not only does it affect us, it wrecks everything. We're like tornadoes, I believe they call us.
Dangerously antisocial. So powerful what you said there, Bill, because something I write at the top of page 18, and I ask the newcomers that I work with, the prospects, I ask them to write there. Your name, Nadia, you were not a bad person. You were sick, honey. And that had to be reiterated to me over and over and over again. And like Bill and I were talking before we came onto this meeting, step 4 might only then show it to you, which it did to me. That's when it revealed it to me. When I saw the absolute insanity of my behavior, not just when I'm drinking. And like Bill says, and it says here, involves those about us in a way that no other human sickness can. So there's two things about that statement. When people have, and I want to be sensitive to anyone here who's sick or sitting with someone who is sick, when somebody has cancer or diabetes or MS or something, motor neuron disease, you can see the decline in the body. You can see the physical effects that the body has, the disease has on the body. And yes, there's sadness and there's grief and there's worry. But like Bill said, our disease affects ourselves, families, their relationships with other people in an ever widening circle like nothing else can. I'm
Should
laughing
we
because
give
in
an
a vision,
honorable mention here to our friend Rob? For those of you who never saw The Green Mile, I'm sure most of us has. It's a classic. There was a guy who had this mystical thing, and he laid his hands on this mouse, and he also touched the prison guard. And they both were hundreds of years old at the end of the movie. Everyone had died, and they were still living. I think that's Rob. I think that's a real story because this guy has stuff in his archives from alcoholism that was there before alcoholism existed.
all right, we're back on page 18. If a person has cancer, all are sorry for him, and no one is angry or hurt, but not so with the alcoholic illness. For with it, there goes annihilation of all things worthwhile in life. It engulfs all those whose lives touch the sufferers. I made a note here, page 104. Let's go see. Yeah, there it is. Page 104, the second paragraph. But for every man who drinks, others are involved. the wife who trembles in fear of the next debauch, the mother and father and children who see their son, line out parent, wasting away. The alcoholic is a tornado, uprooting sweet affections. Well, here it goes. We're gonna carry on. We're gonna hear more about this now. It brings misunderstanding, fierce resentment, financial insecurity, disgusted friends and employers, warped lives of blameless children, sad wives and parents. Anyone can increase the list. Now stop. Sit with you, sitting with you're sponsoring, you're taking someone through this work. Turn these into questions and let them share. And if they're not ready to share yet, because they're a little bit delusional and they still don't think that they got any resentments or it's their disease has only hurt them, share on where you've done this. Share on where this is your story. The warped lives of blameless children. That's me. I'm a mom. I have two. Bill knows, he's met my one. Ursula knows my kids. Warped lives.
And I
The
think
fierce
because of our
resentment.
self-centeredness, you hear a lot of people in the fellowship say, well, I thought I was only hurting myself. I never thought I was hurting myself. I wouldn't hurt myself. But what I didn't realize is the effect I had on other people. In fact, the secretary of our home group used to say on a pretty regular basis, enough for me to have heard it many times. The insane asylums are filled with people who suffer from alcoholism that never took a drink. And if you want a real dose of reality, we hear our stories and we laugh all the way to the penitentiary and the nut house with our fellows. Wait till you hear an Al Anon speaker that has lost their mind, that has made a penitentiary decision, that was willing to take a life or give up the life of one of the kids to stay with the alcoholic. And we get a different perspective on just how insidious this illness is. It doesn't just it says it engulfs. That means it consumes this thing we call spirits in the bottle. It gets inside of me, and not only does it take me down to the abyss with it, it takes everyone who's willing to go or unwilling to go. And then they did a study. We won't get way too far off track, but what the hell, it's going to take us about 6 years to get through the book. All the information we have is no big deal. They came up with a fellowship called Adult Children of Alcoholics. And there was a study done that each member of the family takes on a certain role. It didn't matter, independent. We could go to South Africa where they named the Oxford group. You could come to the United States. You could go to the UK, wherever you are. And what you'll find is independent of each other. Children and spouses that grew up with alcoholics started to morph into certain roles. And I remember one of the child was like the wallflower. You didn't even know they were there. One of them was the perfect kid at school, straight A's and on every society to reflect that there's nothing happening at home. Then you get a guy like me who's an outright mental defect who can't contain what's going on home, and is the acting out child and the one who's headed for trouble and destitution. And ironically, if one of the children change roles, like maybe one day I get tired of going to jail and I make some changes in my life, another member of the family takes the assignment of that role. I mean, this thing is, you want to talk about something that's beyond anything we could describe, almost like a horror story. And it affects countless lives of blameless everyone. And like I said, if you get a chance, you go to one of those conferences where they get someone who has told a story of depth and weight in another fellowship. Don't discount those stories. Some of them are more impactful than the AA messages. Amazing.
Yeah, it really is. We at our home group, we invite Al-Anon speakers once a quarter, and it is normally a dead quiet room. You can hear a penny drop. Thanks, Bill. Page 18, we are at the second paragraph. So I said we're going to have bucket loads. I hope we've just dished you a whole lot of destitution and pitiful, incomprehensible demoralization. But here we go. We're ramping up. We hope we beg of you to know that this volume will inform and comfort those who are or who may be affected. In the early days, 1930s, when these little groups were popping up and mushrooming, the wives and children, they were also involved in these meetings. It wasn't Alan on one side, AA's one side, they were together. They were together and they were getting their solution together in that house. Highly competent psychiatrists, one of which was Carl Jung. I mean, that's no joke. That's a household name if you've heard one. Who have dealt with us have found it sometimes impossible to persuade an alcoholic to discuss his situation without reserve. But strangely enough, wives, parents, and intimate friends usually find us even more approachable than do the doctor and the psychiatrist and the doctor. So let's
Talk
go.
about
We don't want
that.
to listen to those who are, yeah,
We'll talk
yeah.
about that later when we take the fifth step. I believe that's where it is, right? Where it says we have seldom given these doctors a fair break. We've seldom told them the truth. I think it's there, but it could be somewhere else. We will get to it. But this kind of any good book is going to cross-reference itself. It's not going to contradict itself. So when it says here that they find us unapproachable, you can't get an alcoholic without reserve to tell you what's going on. He's either embarrassed and ashamed, or he doesn't know. And then it says that the family, right? How did that read? His situation without reserve. Strangely enough, wives, parents, and intimate friends usually find us even more unapproachable than do the psychiatrist and the doctor. So we're even unapproachable to the people that love us. We can never tell them what's going on. We get mad at them. Resentment breeds when you start talking to me about my drinking. Not only am I unapproachable, I start to defend my drinking. That's why the magic of AA is when Bill went to talk to Dr. Bob, he says, I'm a goner. There's nothing you could do to save me. He said, I'm not here to save you. I'm here to save me. And he told him all about his drinking, and Dr. Bob agreed. Up till that point, everyone's been talking to us about our drinking. And it's like how they described it in the book, the first 40 years, right, Rob? It was like they were people standing outside of the cave. I'm in the cave, a misfit, and they're yelling at me outside of the cave. And what happened is one of us came inside of the cave because we had been there before. And then we spoke the language of the heart. That's the magic of Alcoholics Anonymous. That's why most of us don't respond so well to psychiatry, psychology, or ordinary treatment. Guess what they do at the end of 30 days? They charge your insurance company 80 grand. They give you a big book and they tell you go see Nadia, Bill, and Rob in A&A. They call it aftercare.
So Bill's just raised a very, very important and near to my heart issue, that quiet desperation, not knowing that there's something to talk about. And I want to make just a little special appeal to anyone that's here with us tonight. How many people? We've got 19 souls in here. Let's go over to page 152. And I'm speaking to somebody in this room, or maybe nobody, or maybe we've been there before. I just want to, just have a moment here, and that quiet desperation. He cannot picture life without alcohol. Someday he will be unable to imagine life either with alcohol or without it. Then he or she will know loneliness such as few do. He will be at the jumping off point. She will wish for the end. We have people like that sitting in these rooms, that quiet desperation at the jumping off point, and they just can't. And that is why we make the approach.
Why do you say sitting in the room, Nadia?
Bill, that's talking out.
Because they're talking about a guy who's dry right now. The reason she said they're sitting in the room is because they're not drinking. And now they know loneliness as few people do. They wish for the end. They're at the jumping off place because one day they will no longer be able to imagine life with alcohol or without it. And that's when you wish for the end, because the medicine is killing you and you need the medicine. And what she's saying is people come into AA and either can't get honest, don't identify, can't believe this will work for them, or are not willing to open up their mouths and say, guess what? They're like a boy whistling in the dark saying, great news. I'm back in the big bed. I didn't lose my job, and they reinstated my probation. Problem solved is people who mistake alcoholism with a drinking problem. The drinking disorder called alcoholism is just a symptom of the underlying disease called alcoholism. The mania for alcohol is just a symptom of our problem. There's a whole lot of other manias, like the mania for self, the fear-driven, all the disorders that we must have a power greater than ourselves. Because it's interesting, she's talking about why, if I have a physical allergy, and I concur, I agree with that, I got it. When I pick up a drink, I get thirstier, big deal. My solution then would not be to drink. Okay, I have an obsession of the mind. What does that mean? That means when I'm not drinking, I'm thinking about not drinking or thinking about drinking, but either way, I'm thinking about alcohol and can't stop it. Okay, that sounds like a mental disorder. So go see a psychiatrist. Don't drink, get Antabuse, and go see a psychiatrist to get on some medication. Neither of those are what's wrong with us. We are disconnected from the power that stops us from putting the first one and setting the cycle in motion. That's why we need to go further, because if information was a solution for alcoholism, they would have written the doctor's opinion, a little chapter from some other doctor, maybe Jung or Freud, and that would have been our solution. But the rest of the book enables you to find a power, and then it even tells you where it is. Isn't that amazing? It's a treasure map. They tell you where the treasure is, and most of us go to some foreign land and look for the treasure where it never is. We want to look beyond the clouds for the treasure that was deep within us the whole time. It's crazy what's going on with you drunks.
Really, really, Dorothy, you had the shoes on all along, sweetheart. All right, page 18. But the ex-problem drinker, who's that? That's me. That's us, right? Who has found this solution, who is properly armed with facts about himself, can generally win the entire confidence of another alcoholic in a few hours. Until such an understanding is reached, little or nothing can be accomplished. And that sums up beautifully what Bill is saying about thousands of alcoholics in rooms of millions. Not everybody has got this disease of alcoholism. But if you are properly armed with the facts about yourself, what the disease is, how it manifests, and what the solution is, you're able to win the confidence of any newcomer who is the hopeless variety. And being armed with the facts means that I know what's wrong with me. I can stick up my hand. Okay, I'm going to own up, because you guys are becoming like, you're my family, right? We've been here. I've been sitting the last 5 days. I don't want to come across as some guru who knows this stuff. I'm just a little small town girl who is obsessed with this book. I'm a nerd. I was a nerd when I went to school, and now I get to be a nerd with all of you guys. But the reason I'm saying that is I want to tell you, I've been struggling with self like you cannot believe the last couple of days. And there are some beautiful souls in this room who take my hand and phone me, and they listen to God, and they are obedient, and they call me out. And when I say, but I can't see it, I can't see it, I can't see it, I can feel it, and you can see it all over my face. And then I get someone who is armed with the fact, a soldier who's towing the line. All right, there's my Navy SEAL coming out. I said I wasn't going to do that tonight. But when someone like that comes to me, it's only them that's going to get me out of myself. With God, of course, because God's speaking through them. But that's the power, man. That's the power. And that's what we get to witness when we take newcomers or even someone who's relapsed or even someone who's sat in these rooms for years dry, not knowing what the solution is, not knowing what the problem is. We get to take them through the book when you're armed with the facts.
Not just talking, I don't believe they're just talking about what we just spoke of, the mental and physical. Because at the very end of this chapter, sum it up, and I'll only read one small snippet of it. I won't go through the whole 4 paragraphs. But it says, our hope is that many alcoholic men and women desperately in need will see these pages or hear our story. It's another form of communication. They didn't have lead meetings and they sent the book out. We'll see these pages, and we believe that it is only by fully disclosing ourselves and our problems that they will be persuaded to say, yes, I am one of them too. I must have this thing. So if I'm properly armed, I can sit there and talk about the shipwreck all day. And then you'll be like the guy in Detox that says, duh, we know that. Can you get us off the ship? If I don't know how to get off the ship, all it is a drunk-a-log. But it's going to take a lot more than that. Something has to happen to affect a change in my life where I can have you on the edge of your seats when you say, yeah, me too, me too. That's what that Bill Dotson said, AA number 3. Yeah, that's me. That's me. I'm like, but I was somebody at one time, but I'm a nobody now. And then our friends laughed at him and they said nothing to be funny about. They were just like him and they were nor like him anymore, like my sponsor says. The guys carrying the message were no longer the guys in the message. Something had changed them, and there's hope for any alcoholic. But as we started, or what she talked about, we didn't get a solution yet. I won't get that far ahead of myself.
Okay, we're gonna bounce. We're gonna bounce very soon. So just bear with me, get ready. That the man who is making the approach. This where we're in meetings and you're hearing them say, if you're a newcomer and you need a sponsor, raise your hand. Can I just say something? When I got into Zoom and you told me to raise my hand, I sat there the whole 60 minutes looking for a raise hand, and where the hell I didn't hear a word nobody was saying. Or I was sitting in that room going, I'm not reading nothing. I'm terrified. Do I have a hand? Where's my hand? What's a hand? You know, what are we doing? We make the approach. We make the approach. There's no give them my number, let them call me. Has had the same difficulty, that he obviously knows what he's talking about, that his whole deportment shouts at the new prospect that he is a man with a real answer. Okay, I know I get very shouty because I get super excited and I get quite loud and in your face. And I've also made the dire mistake of shouting at people with this book in my hand. This is the solution, take it. You're gonna die if you don't. No, no, that's not what they're saying here. This is what they're saying. Let's go look at an example, a real life example. Let's go to page 9 in Bill's story, the second paragraph. Do you guys remember when Ebby came to visit Bill? Knock, knock. He'd given him a call. Bill was sitting there, bleak November, alone, drinking bathtub gin, and his buddy Ebby calls and he rocks up at the door. Ebby's whole deportment shouted at Bill that he was a man with a solution, because it says the door opened and he stood there, fresh skinned and glowing. There was something about his eyes. He was inexplicably different. His whole deportment, the way that he carries himself, is what shouted that he's got something.
So, and Nadia makes a good point. She wasn't around when Rob, Bob, and Bill Wilson were inventing AA, so I've got to bring her up to speed, Rob. They were mailing out this book. And in working with others, it says when you discover a prospect for Alcoholics Anonymous, and what they say here, what we just read, is that the man who is making the approach, They're not to meetings raising their hand, although it's not a bad idea to say, is this anyone's first time at a meeting? On Zoom, I can't see your red eyes. I can't see if you're falling over, you're passed out. You can cover up your picture and put a glamour shot of what you looked like 40 years ago in high school. I'll buy it. You know what I mean? But the reality is they were mailing out this book and telling people, and we'll get to that later on in the chapter in A Vision for You, which you already read some of, where people were going to different places in the country and making what we call 12-step calls, which is almost a thing of the past in AA. Very few people know what a 12-step call is. It's very difficult to make a 12-step call on Zoom. Yes, I'll call an alcoholic, but they were talking about going and sitting with drunks coming off of a drunk. If they could get them to a detox, if there was such a thing then, or putting them into the hospital like Towns at the time. It was action, and that's what was saving their lives, was intensive work with other alcoholics. That worked when everything saved the day. So they're mailing this book out because there was no AA. Sometimes we got to go back in time to say, what are you talking about? Making an approach, and then I'm mad because we don't jump over each other to throng the new guy. And I'll tell you what, if you go into some of these treatment centers nowadays, if they don't have armbands on, some of them are wearing everyday clothes. And members of AA come in, and if we don't walk in a group, I can't always tell the sober members of AA with the sober members in the treatment center, because guess what? We're all human beings. We all look alike. It isn't until you ask them to talk about what it looks like now that they've been rescued from the ship. That's where the story ends, because all they've been is given a life preserver. And then you hear the message of, guess what? Boom, I was like you. I used to do this. I used to do this. Yeah, me too, me too, me too. Here's what happened. I surrendered to this power. I took an inventory. I shared with someone my grosser handicaps. I asked God to change me, and he set me free. I've made as much restitution as I can. And now, as a part of my recovery, which the book tells us to tell them that, I need to give this away to keep it. So you're never wasting my time when I go out of my way to try and help you, whether it's unsolicited, whether it's received, or whether it's not, because I'm doing what waiters do, serve. Right? If you're waiting on God, do what waiters do, they serve. And that's what happens. We get a spirit of a servant, which is the highest level in the position of the hierarchy of Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm right there at the top. I'm a servant. I come in here a big shot, wanting to be the president.
From Queen. Thanks, Bill. All right, we're at the bottom of page 18. That he has no attitude of holier than thou, nothing whatever, the sincere desire to be helpful, that there are no fees to pay, no axes to grind, no people to please, no lectures to be endured. That is a really simple, handy toolkit for a sponsor. There you are. That's what we do. We're just there to serve them. We're just there to help them. We're not there to lecture. We're not there to control them. We're not there to micromanage. We're not there to fight with them. We're not there to force them into this thing. There's the simple little rules. Sponsor Kit 101. These are the conditions we found most effective. After such an approach, here's a promise. Here's a promise. And you know how I know that this is legit, real, true? I'm looking at men and women who have taken up their beds and walked again. I'm looking at them. I'm looking at you guys. After such an approach, many take up their beds and walk again. What a promise, man. What a promise. Reminds me of a story of a man, a lame man that lay many, many, many moons at a magic pool. And a really powerful carpenter came and spoke to him. And you know what's really cool about that story? That radical Jew said to that layman, said to him, do you really want to get well? He didn't ask him like, do you want to get like, do you want to get well? Can I do something? He was like, do you really want to get well? Pick up your mat and go. It's a program of action, this. Anyway, it's just, I love that story. That's one of my little line outs here. None of us make a sole vocation of this work, nor do we think its effectiveness would be increased if we did. We feel that elimination of our drinking is but a beginning, a much more important demonstration of our principles lies before us in our respective homes, occupations, and affairs. I'm going to stop there quickly. I just want to let us do what I love doing. Let's toddle on over page 82. Page 82, fourth paragraph, 1, 2, 3, 4. We feel that elimination of our drinking is but a beginning. Just like it says here, the alcoholic is like a tornado roaring his way through the lives of others. We feel a man is unthinking when he says that sobriety is enough. This is just the beginning. And then here's something really powerful. You know, we're always looking for balance. That elusive balance that we're all looking for in our lives. What is what is our priority? We come into AA and we're just like AA all the way. But Bill actually gives us a balance here. He actually gives us a very simple little formula here for a balance in our lives. That elusive balance that I have been looking for my whole life. Bill puts it very succinctly. He says, a much more important demonstration of our principles lies before us, and here's the order: in our respective homes, occupations, we need to be seventh tradition, we need to be self-supporting, and our affairs, newcomers. So I got it the other way around. I was like sponsoring, neglecting my family, not working, cutting time to sponsor, taking lunch and making it like a 90-minute lunch so I could sponsor because I have to sponsor. No. Here's the order. First, your families, then your job. You need to be self-supporting, and then the newcomer. All of us, yep.
So you read a very important line. None of us makes a sole vocation, nor do we think that the effectiveness would be increased. And here's why. Fire truck doesn't get used till there's a fire. You could drive around town all day long with the lights and the bells and the little Dalmatian on the back of the fire truck, but that's not going to create a fire. We can run around proselytizing to a bunch of drunks who aren't ready to admit that they need help. That's why us laying down our lives and becoming evangelists for AA would not make us any more effective than we are now. There has to be a necessity for there to be a solution. In other words, a drunk's, you can lead a horse to water, I get it. But we can also, with the last paragraph that we read, no axes to grind, no holier than thou. I'm not shouting from the rooftops. We're not witch burners here. We're not prohibitionists here. We're not, what they call the people who are anti-drinkers, wet nags, killjoys, all that good stuff throughout the book. We don't go out and beat up on drinking as an institution because we've become aware that alcohol or drinking is not the problem. If alcohol produced alcoholism, then everyone who drank alcohol would contract alcoholism. It is a small percentage of people who have a different response, an abnormal response called an allergy to alcohol that produces alcoholism, not the symptom. So what they're saying is we could all go out and be sponsors. You got to have someone to sponsor, or what's the difference? So you're a sponsor, you got a title, you're a fireman, big deal. We got to replace the truck. It hasn't been used in 30 years because there were no fires. I thought that was a good analogy and a great way to close our meeting. I will say this much. Usually, Nadia does most of the talking here, believe it or not, if you listen to the recordings. Today, not so much. We were afraid she was going to be taken out by the weather storm.
Thank you. Ah, thank you. Oh, that was so awesome. Yeah, we're going to wrap it up. We had so much fun. We went over time. Okay. Now the floor is yours. See, Bill's done all the talking. I definitely get to shut up. And please, questions, share, tell us, put up your hands. Let us hear from